Welcome to another Venlearn Editor tutorial. In this tutorial, we are going to focus on the assessment or assessment node. So looking at the example, we can click on the assessment, for example, JSS1 assessment. Now, we are going to talk about the different properties in this assessment. And then we'll discuss one after the other, the different options and the properties they do. So for example, when we created this assessment, we named it JSS1 assessment. In your case, you may decide to rename it and say JSS1 exam. So that's the first property. Also, you can hover over the arrow by the side of each property to know or get an idea of what the property does. Okay. Then the next property is the brand logo. So we can actually add our organization's logo to Venlearn so that the exam has it and it looks a bit more like our brand. Then the next item we do is to change our brand color. So you can leave it at default or change the color that is desired for your school or your organization. Then assessment code is a unique code to identify an assessment. You can leave the default or you can decide to regenerate another one, or you can put the code that you feel you prefer. Then there's also another option, description. This is essentially going to describe the assessment. Then you can put a general instruction. So read carefully before answering any question. So you can use the editor formatting. For example, you can say answer all questions. All questions carry equal mark. So we can stop there. We can also decide to format the title and make it bold or italicize it, whatever formatting you want for your instructions. Then we go to the right pane where we have the sub property. So the first property we're going to talk about is the assessment type. So for every assessment, it has a type. So currently there's exam, continuous assessment, mock test. So in our case, we are setting JSS1 exam, so we can leave the default as an exam. The other option we have is the paper flow. So paper flow is a way for you to decide or determine how candidates switch to a new paper. Force continuous is an option. So if you click on it, you see the different options. Force continuous, client controlled, or server controlled. So force continuous tells you that a new paper can only start after the completion of a current paper. So regardless, if you are concluding a new paper, you are starting another paper. Then client controlled is determined by the client. The client is essentially a computer where students or examinees take the test. So clients, the students can determine which paper they want to start with. Why server controlled can be determined by the admin. So the administrator can be the source of truth. So whatever admin sets is overwritten by what the editor sets. So admin can decide that they start with maths instead of English first and whatnot. Also, another property is allow interpaper navigation. So, if you want them to switch between paper, whether or not they've completed a paper, it can be set here as well. Determines whether a candidate can switch between papers during an assessment. So if you want them to be able to switch, maybe if they're in maths and maths is too difficult, they can just move to English and start. You can allow that. Note that sometimes there's an overlap between paper flow settings and allow interpaper navigation settings. So you may want to check out the documentation for more information. The next property is show results after assessment. So many times you want to show them their results or their score after the assessment. Organizations like JAM may decide not to show them instantly. Maybe they want to do a further review of the overall assessment performance before they publish the results. In that case, you can decide that you don't want to show the assessment after the result after assessment. So all they will just see is thank you for completing the test. But if you want them to see their results, you can pick yes instead. Also, in a similar way, not only can you show their score or their results, you can as well show their corrections. So they can see the questions they got right and the ones they got wrong. That setting is show answers after assessment, yes or no. If you want them to be able to see the answers after an assessment, you pick yes, or you can as well pick no. Now, the next thing we are going to talk about is the context menu for assessments. So if you right-click on an assessment, there are some options that can be done on the assessment. For example, we can add a subject. Currently, we have 2 subjects added. But if we want an extra subject, say physics, all we need to do is to click on create subject. So we can decide that the subject is physics. We can add an optional description about the subject, whatever it is. So this description is greatly dependent on the intent of the subject. So we can add a 3rd subject. So we can now see that we have 3 subjects. Now, the other thing we can do is to manage subjects. You can manage subjects from here, or you can also as well manage subjects from here. So if you click on manage subjects, you can see the list of subjects we have. Currently, we have 3 subjects: biology, chemistry, and physics. Now, there are some things that can be done. So I'm currently selected biology. Biology and chemistry has no description, but physics do have a description. So we can decide to move physics, biology down. Say we want chemistry to be the first subject when it's shown on their client. We can click here and say move up. Chemistry is now the item at the top. If we want physics to come next, we move up, or we can move down as well. So it allows us to readjust or rearrange subjects. Another thing we can do is to edit. For example, chemistry do not have a description. Say we want to add a description. This is where we can do it. We click on edit, and then we can add the description. Note that wherever you change, whenever you edit a subject, it is updated across all the places the subject is used in the project. So that's why I have these prompts here to notify you. So we are good. The next thing we can do is to manage topics. So each of these subjects, we can assign or associate topics with them. Currently, we have not added any topics. In a separate tutorial, we're going to talk about topics and section, where we are going to show you how to create and manage topics, just like we are doing for subjects. But to do that from here, you can just click on the manage topic. There's no topic. We can decide to add new topics from here for that selected subject, chemistry. We'll leave that for now. Another thing we can do is we can delete. So if we don't like a subject here, we can decide that we want to delete biology. Note that when you delete a biology, it affects all the places biology are using. So this is a very, very serious action. So you are warned. Before deleting a subject, you must delete all its usage. So also, another thing you do is deleting a subject entirely. Ensure you come and delete the biology node from here before you decide to delete the subjects from here. The last item we can do in this subjects modal is to add a new subject. So instead of adding subjects from the 3 view, you can as well add subjects from here as well. So if you add a subject, you can say, let's add a new subject called economics. So we can decide to add a description. So we've added economics. So there are now 4 subjects. So if we close, we can, if we right click on the assessment, we can discover that we now have 4 subjects: chemistry, biology, physics, and economics. Biology and physics are disabled because they have already been added in the 3 already. So you cannot add multiple subjects with the same title under the same assessment. So the next item here, if we right click here, is add assessment next to this. So there are some cases, if I collapse this assessment this way, let's say I add a second assessment and call it JSS2 exam. Now, sometimes I want to add an assessment between JSS2, or let's call this JSS3 exam. So let's say I want to add a JSS2 exam in between JS1 and JS3. Usually, how one may do it is they may first add the assessment, call it JSS2 exam. And then after adding the assessment, they drag and drop it in between 1 and 3. And then it's the way it is supposed to be ordered. But there's a better way. I may decide to delete this assessment I've just created so that I can show you how to add assessments after an assessment. So all you need to do is to click on, right click here, add assessment next to this. So when you do that, you can now add the JSS2 assessment. So that's how it works. So the next item is rename. So you can rename an assessment. So if you made a mistake with the naming, you can change that from here, and it's going to be renamed for you. So let's focus on JSS1. Let's expand it as well. So the next thing we can do is to copy. So we can copy an assessment and paste it. Mind you, when you copy, you can only paste under an assessment parent. For example, the paste item is enabled here. But if you come under the assessment itself, you will not see paste is disabled. You can't paste an assessment under a node that is not compatible with it. So it must be from the parent. In a similar way, you can cut and paste. When you cut, it means that when you're pasting it, it is going to remove the existing node you cut and send that and paste it there. Similarly, we have another option called duplicate. So duplicate is a way of copying and pasting in one action. So when you copy and you paste, you have to copy first and then paste. But duplicates can just do everything at once. So for example, if I want to duplicate this subject, now I can just click on duplicate. And it has created JSS1 exam copy. And it has the exact replica of what we have already. Everything is copied. The system handles it for us. The next item we are going to talk about is delete. So instead of me to show, I will show that with the copy. So I can delete this copy I've just created simply by clicking delete here. And then I'm prompted it will click to delete it. So we are good. So the next item here is to preview. Preview is just a way to visualize what your assessment looks like. For example, if we want to preview this biology JSS1 assessment, we can either choose to preview it here, or we can as well choose to preview it from here. And we can see what it looks like here. So this is how an assessment preview looks like. So you'll see the assessment title, the brand logo, the color, and all that. So we can go back. So the next thing we can do is to show we can also sort the assessments children. For example, biology and physics. So if we want to sort it in descending order, we can choose the reverse order. We can restore the sort order. Then the other option we have is export as exam file. So this is also very important. So when we are done with our assessment and we are good to go, especially when there are no errors. Currently for this JSS1 exam, there's one error because we have physics and we are yet to fix physics issues. So if we delete physics, I think we should be left with no issue. So you can see that this JSS1 assessment is clean now. It can be exported. So for us to export it, we just have to right click and export as exam file. So exam file is essentially how we need to save before we export. So the system is prompting us. So we can save first. And then we are now asked where we want to save our assessment. So we can choose the assessment. So we can call it JSS1 exam demo project. So it's going to save as a zip file. So that file is what we'll now use in Venlearn software so that we can import it and then students can see the exam. So that's the option for export. So this is usually the last thing we do after we create our assessment. Another option is that we can also import paper from another file. So for example, under this assessment, we may decide to import another paper. Maybe we have another project. Let's do an example. If we click on this, we are going to be asked to choose the Venlearn project. So let me see if I have any projects. I click on Venlearn Editor. I can choose, this is my current project, so I can't choose this. I can still choose this, but I want to show you a typical example. Let's choose this. Video samples. When you open the project, you can see that under sample assessment, we have paper 1 and listening paper. So the system allows me to select paper because I want to add something under an assessment. So that is why this is selectable. So if I want to import this paper, all I need to do is select it. You can select multiple paper. So instead of me to copy one after the other, because if you watch this paper, it has a lot of questions in it. So if I want to copy it, I'll just click it. So we are good with paper 1. So when we copy paper 1, it is added. So it has automatically added another paper from another project. So this is a very good way to merge projects. So if you have one of your colleagues working on mathematics, another colleague working on biology, and the exam comprises mathematics and biology, you can just get the person's project and copy his work into one, so it will be exported together for the exam, instead of you to have to copy them one after the other. So that's the essence of imports paper from Venlearn file. So we have imported from another file called video demo project. So if you open it, you can see full details. So it's a recursive copy. It copies the descendants, everything inside, including the errors we show. So this one we copy definitely has an issue with question 4 the answer is not set. So we can also set the answer here and the issue will be gone. Now that's that. Let me collapse this. There's already too many questions. So let's check. That's essentially the end of the property. So an assessment is essentially the tests or the work or the assessment or the exam that you give to candidates. So you can perform so many actions on an assessment. There are so many properties on an assessment. In the next tutorial, we're going to be talking about the paper. And we're going to be talking about the properties of the paper and all you can do with a paper. Thank you.